Every Friday in 1933, in Cinder Bottom, West Virginia, Hetty Combs took her husband's $11 scrip pay and slid one silver dollar beneath the cast iron skillet. He never knew. For 8 years, she never missed. By 1941, what hid under that skillet bought her family, something the coal company never intended, a way out. From gaming the company store's own credit timing to one weekly ritual so quiet nobody noticed for years. Miners' wives kept 30 secret money tricks alive inside a system designed to keep them broke. But to understand how, you need to understand the trap. Scrip was more than a paycheck. It was a metal token pressed with the company's name or a slip of paper torn from a booklet handed out on Fridays in place of real dollars. In towns like Coretta and Keystone, 3 out of every 4 miners got paid this way. Tokens could only be spent at the company store, nowhere else. The store itself kept a ledger for every family, tracking each pound of flour, each yard of cloth, every penny's worth of beans, all at prices marked up by a quarter over what you would pay in a town down the line. Bread that cost 5 cents in Welch might cost 7 at the company counter. Rent was another chain. 30% of a miner's scrip was gone before the week even began, deducted right off the top for the roof over his head. The company owned the houses, the school, the doctor, the store, and the land underfoot. Most families never saw cash, only scrip good as gold inside the store, worthless outside. The storekeeper held the ledger, and the ledger held the family. If you needed medicine, it went on the tab. If you fell behind, the debt followed you, week after week, year after year. The system was called a credit card for the mountains, but it kept families tied to the same patch of earth, the same company, the same debts. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. Inside this closed loop, every penny stretched became a small rebellion. Every coin hidden, every barter struck, every trick passed from mother to daughter was a way to loosen the grip, if only for a moment. In these towns, thrift wasn't just about survival. It was a quiet answer to a system that said, "This is all you'll ever have." Hetty Combs had a ritual as steady as the mine whistle. Each Friday, before the scrip was spent or the ledger was marked, she slipped a single silver dollar into the bottom of her old cast iron skillet, 1 coin a week, hidden beneath the weight of daily meals, real money, not the token stamped by the company. She never called it genius. She called it Friday. But a skillet could only hold so much hope. To turn scrip into cash, Hetty found neighbors willing to trade 75 cents in real dollars for every dollar of scrip, a quiet deal struck in back rooms and on front porches. It meant a quarter lost on every trade, but cash meant choices, groceries in town, a doctor who didn't keep a company ledger. That was the price of a little freedom. In the yard behind her house, beans climbed rough twine, each pod worth 30 cents at the market down the line. Hetty grew more than her family could eat, trading extra for coal or a sack of flour. Every seed saved from the last harvest was a promise that next year she'd buy less from the company store. The house itself became a tool. When times got tight, she rented the back room to a boarder for $2 a week, cash, not scrip. The boarder got a bed and a plate at supper, and Hetty got a few bills tucked away, safe from the company's reach. Sometimes she'd save bacon grease in an old lard tin, trading it for 40 cents worth of coal from a neighbor. Waste became warmth, and nothing left the kitchen unused. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. Every trick was a small rebellion, A coin hidden, a deal struck, a seed saved, a bed let out. These were not just habits, they were quiet answers to a world that had said, "This is all you'll ever have." A new dress at the company store cost $3, enough to feed a family for a week. Hetty turned that price tag into a challenge. She gathered empty flour sacks, scrubbed them until the brand faded, and stitched them by hand into dresses for her daughters. The only cost was her time and a bit of bluing, and what the store called a luxury became a badge of pride. $3 saved was $3 the company couldn't claim. Barter was its own kind of currency. When the coal pile ran low, Hetty traded a basket of extra beans for 60 cents worth of coal. It was a simple swap. Warmth for food, no script needed, no storekeeper's ledger. Every trade was a step outside the company's reach. Coffee was a luxury most couldn't afford, but Hetty made it last. She roasted chicory roots, mixing them with the last spoonfuls of store-bought grounds. Each cup stretched the real coffee a little further, saving 40 cents a month. The taste was sharper, but it kept the mornings going and the penny in her pocket. Sometimes she asked the storekeeper for a float, a 5-cent advance on next week's script. It wasn't much, but it meant she could buy what she needed on Monday and pay it back on Friday. That tiny bit of credit was a lifeline, but it was also a reminder. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. When the children caught a cough, Hetty reached for her own remedies. A tonic brewed from wild cherry bark and honey cost just 15 cents to make, compared to the $1 bottle at the store. With every home cure, she kept another coin from slipping away. Each of these tricks, whether a dress sewn from a flour sack or a barter struck at the garden fence, proved that saving could be just as powerful as earning. In a world built to keep her in debt, Hetty managed her household like a quiet general, turning scarcity into strategy. A worn pair of shoes rarely saw the inside of a trash bin. Trick number 20. Hetty kept a tin of salvaged rubber scraps by the stove. When her children's soles wore thin, she traced the outline onto an old tire, cut it to fit, and stitched it on with waxed thread. The cost of a new pair at the company store, nearly $1, became a 20-cent fix, a small victory with every step. In the yard, hens scratched through the dust, their steady work earning 60 cents a week in eggs. A single laying hen could outpace the store's high-priced bacon and give Hetty a quiet edge. Eggs for breakfast, eggs for barter, eggs tucked in a neighbor's basket as thanks for a favor. Blankets came from the past as much as the present. Trick 18. When a quilt wore through, Hetty didn't throw it away. She cut the good patches, pieced them with scraps from dresses long outgrown, and stitched a new cover. A store-bought blanket cost $1.50. Her patchwork quilt cost nothing but time, memory, and sore fingers. Nothing from the frying pan went to waste. Every drop of bacon grease was poured into a jar, cooled, and saved. Trick 17. That grease replaced store-bought oil, which sold for 10 cents a pint. It flavored beans, fried potatoes, and greased the skillet for cornbread. What the store called waste, Hetty called tomorrow's supper. Soap was a monthly expense she refused to pay. Trick 16. Hetty boiled water with wood ash and leftover fat, stirring until it thickened into harsh, honest bars. Store soap cost $1.20 a box. Hers cost only patience and a steady hand. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. In Hetty's hands, Every scrap had a second life. Worn shoes, backyard hens, old quilts, grease jars, and soap pots. Waste wasn't waste at all. It was another way to say no to the ledger. Seed, a garden seed, saved from last year's harvest, cost 2 cents if you bought it at the store. Hetty never wasted that money. Trick 15. Every fall, she dried the best pods and tucked them into a tin on the pantry shelf. The seed wasn't just a start for next spring, it was insurance against a bad year, a way to keep one more coin out of the company's till. 2 cents here, 2 cents there. But over a decade, it meant real money stayed home. Washing was more than a chore. It was a calculation. Trick 14. Hetty took in boarders' laundry, soaking shirts in a shared wash boiler with neighbors. Each family brought a stick of wood for the fire, splitting the cost of fuel. For 6 cents a load, she scrubbed and rinsed, her hands raw, but her purse a little heavier. The company store sold lye soap, but Hetty's wash water was warmed by community, not by scrip. Lighting the house after sunset took planning. Trick 13. Kerosene lamps rationed to the last drop. 5 cents bought a week's worth if you measured carefully and snuffed every flame before bed. Hetty marked the bottle with a line for each day, teaching her children that a bright room came dear in coal country. Every penny saved meant another step away from the ledger. Root cellar, under the house, was a fortress against winter. Trick 12. For $1.80, a neighbor's son dug the pit, lined it with stone, and Hetty filled it with potatoes, apples, and carrots. All winter long, she could feed her family without paying the store's inflated prices. In that cool, dark space, summer's labor turned into winter's security. Sugar. Sunday was for sweetness. Trick 11. Sugar, 2 cents a scoop, used only on the Lord's Day. All week, Hetty saved the precious grains, measuring out just enough for a single pie or a pot of coffee. The rest waited, safe in a jar. Proof that even a little pleasure could be rationed, protected, and made to last. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. In kitchens lit by kerosene and warmed by coal, a different kind of ledger kept the real score. The storekeeper's book might track every bean and bolt of cloth, but behind closed doors, it was the women who measured what mattered. 70% of households in these mining towns leaned on wives' barter and backroom deals to keep food on the table when the scrip ran out. UPA oral histories tell of women who could turn a handful of garden beans into a sack of flour or a dozen eggs into coal for the stove. Their calculations weren't written in columns, but in the quiet exchanges at the garden fence, the whispered agreements at church, and the careful saving of seed from last year's crop. A pot of soup stretched with foraged greens, a patch sewn over a torn coat, a borrowed cup of sugar paid back in home-canned peaches. These were the entries in their invisible ledgers. When the company's credit dried up, it was the women who kept the families afloat, trading, lending, and repaying in trust and labor. WPA interviewers found that in 7 out of 10 homes, it was a wife's barter that made the difference between hunger and a full supper. These acts were more than thrift. Every deal struck outside the store's reach was a quiet stand against the ledger that tried to own them. The company replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. But real freedom was measured in the hands that made do, in the networks that turned scarcity into solidarity. In the story of the miners' wives, thrift was never just survival. It was leadership, practiced in aprons and whispered in kitchens, holding the community together when the world outside offered little but debt. A torn shirt at the elbow didn't mean buying new. Hetty kept a jar of needles and colored thread by the lamp, mending what she could. The company store charged $1 for a shirt, but a careful hand and an hour's work saved every penny. Each patch was a quiet act of pride. When winter pressed in, neighbors pooled for firewood. Alone, a cord cost $1, but splitting the load meant each family paid just a quarter. The warmth stretched further, and the savings did too. It was practical, not charity, and it kept more than the stove burning through the coldest months. Patience at the peddler's wagon paid off. Hetty waited until the end of the month when a sack of sugar dropped by 20 cents. A week's wait turned a luxury into something almost affordable, and the company's markup lost its bite, if only for a day. Each Friday, a nickel went into the burial fund tin at church. A proper funeral cost more than most families saw in a month, but a nickel a week meant no one faced loss alone. Solidarity outlasted scrip. When flour prices rose, Hetty swapped oats for meal, 2 cents worth at a time. Every trade was a small stand against the company's hold. In these acts, mending, pooling, waiting, sharing, swapping, a web of trust grew stronger than any ledger. Summer's bounty meant long days over the stove, canning beans, tomatoes, and peaches had to line the cellar shelves. Each jar, sealed tight, saved $2 in the winter, money that never touched the company's ledger. Trick number 5. Preservation was more than thrift. It was a hedge against hunger and debt. When coal ran low, the children filled buckets with track coal scattered along the rail bed, a few cents worth at a time. Every lump gathered was a penny kept from the store's till. Trick 4. In coal country, even play became part of the family's bottom line. Union talk grew louder as the decade wore on, but open support meant risk. Trick 3. Hetty hid a penny each week in a false bottom jar, quietly collecting union dues for the day the men would need them. 1 cent at a time, she built a shield against eviction and blacklisting. Trick 2. The battered passbook in her apron pocket tracked every coin that slipped past the storekeeper's eye, a silent record of her defiance. And every Friday, before the scrip was spent, 5 cents disappeared into a secret stash behind the flour bin. Trick 1. A weekly habit, small and steady, that turned hope into a sum no company could claim. Over years, these coins stacked toward $261, a fortune built in nickels, dimes, and quiet rebellion. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. May 1941 arrived with a promise no company store could offer. The union mine up the valley posted a wage, 13 real dollars a week, paid in cash, not tokens. For Hetty and Russell, it meant their work would finally buy freedom, not just another month's credit. On a Friday morning, with the last scrip ledger squared and the garden already sprouting beans, Hetty pulled her old cast-iron skillet from its place beside the stove. She tipped it gently, and the coins, nickels, dimes, silver dollars spilled across the table, their weight built from years of small hidden victories. $261 stacked in the open at last. Enough for rent, for train fare, for a start somewhere the company couldn't follow. Russell watched, silent, as Hetty counted every coin, each one was a week's worth of pride, a quiet answer to a world that tried to own every penny. The company replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. But on that day, real freedom sounded like coins on wood and the hush of a house being packed. They left Cinderbottom with their heads high, walking away from the storekeeper's ledger and toward a wage that belonged to them. She never called it genius. She called it Friday. Subscribe for more true stories of quiet rebellion and everyday courage. Today, a sack of flour costs $1.19, and most of us never touch a silver dollar. But every card swipe echoes the old barter and ledgers. We replaced their skillets with credit and called it freedom. She never called it genius. She called it Friday. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe for more.